Hello and welcome along to the Andrew Eborn Show with another thrilling episode with my very special guest. On the other side of the pond is the
Way over
wonderful
here.
Karen Lanning. How are you, Karen?
Good.
Wonderful. And I'll tell you what's good is that we had a quick bit of a rehearsal beforehand just to make sure that the books behind you were real. Because so many people come on now in this Zoom generation and talk about fake news. Most people never even read the books behind them, do they?
Well, I have read almost every book back here, and as I get out of, these are the three that I've written myself. But
this is
one of the things that truly you want to do as a writer is to read.
Look, you've got to read as a writer. There's no good reading, writing, and arithmetic is what they teach us over here. So it's got to be good. And I said just while we were getting the rehearsal, make sure you show your merchandise because it's no good sitting in front of it. Nobody can see it.
My big head is in front of the middle book.
You're entitled to a big head because not only are you a brilliant writer, you're a fantastic scientist, which we're going to come on to. But just before that, what I love about the guests around the show is that people tune in and we have wild and wacky and wonderful people, WWW, who come on the show and talk about their own lives. And you, in fact, got in touch with me because one of your friends was on the show. Tell us about that.
Yes. So crazy Jon D Amore, who is a friend of a friend, is how I got introduced to him. And of course, he's a musician, rock and roller, and he wrote a column for the paper that a friend of mine was also on in Philadelphia. And so when he started writing these books, she had a reading for him in our little town. And so, of course, I went. I'm very supportive of authors. And he's so funny. He is so funny. And he's got like 1 million stories. And some of them I'd be scared to really get into as far as the mafia is concerned. That's like, oh my God. Hi, John. I didn't do anything. I didn't say anything. So anyway, he sent me a link to his interview with you, and then he started like, Karen, you need to get on this show, It was like, okay, John, I didn't say anything. I'm not. Yes, okay. I don't want the mafia to come to my house,
It is a sort of scary thing, an offer you cannot refuse. I've got to buy that book,
I thought I'm going to have a horse head in my bed, if I don't contact Andrew.
No horsing around will make it a stable relationship. I know it's always a thrill. But what I loved about it, he came on as an author, and we did that. And we didn't talk about any of his books. We talked about, and he told us stories that he's never told anybody. Such as the Chuck Berry My Ding-a-ling story.
I love that story. Yeah, it was great.
Wasn't that brilliant?
And I pushed that interview out because I thought, this is so funny, and it's stories that should be out there.
And I think that's right. And the stories that should be out there, because that's what authors do, isn't it? They go into the dark and they illuminate. That's what they do. My good old chum, Margaret Atwood, would confirm that. Because you had a little chat with her, didn't you?
Right. Yeah, she was getting ready to have this show on Hulu, The Handmaid's Tale, turned into a limited series. And I contacted her. Of course, some of these interviews are timing. When somebody is interested in promoting something, of course, have something new out. And so I asked her for an interview, and she was kind enough to take some time out, and we did an interview, and it was lovely. She is so funny. And yeah, if anybody's interested, I actually have both the written and the audio on my blog. So, you can listen to it. We had quite an interesting discussion about, her upbringing and philosophies and various things. So it was a fun interview.
Oh no, it's fantastic, and this is what I love about it, because you get to peek beneath the kimono of these people, that understand a little bit of where they come from. They always say, "Show me a child till the age of 7, I'll show you the man or woman."
Right, right.
Good old Socrates when he's not playing football. We love it. It's got to work really, really well. And what I love about you, I mean, you grew up in Texas, not too far from NASA.
Right. Yep. And
both your parents are involved. I mean, if both your parents were wonderful professionals. Talk to me about those early days.
well, NASA totally changed the little town that I was in, which, fascinatingly enough, is a Quaker town. And so it's maybe a little bit different than your normal Texas town. And then NASA, when NASA blew in, about 1962 is when they started building and expanding. The town just exploded with population. But, you know, you had a real interesting mix of people. And, you know, but we lived on a small piece of acreage. And so I grew up literally riding horses rather than bikes, because all they had was shell roads. I mean, literally oyster shell roads.
Rabbits. I reckon you were a rabbit catcher.
I did catch a rabbit. Being from Texas, actually, I chased down an armadillo.
Oh, did you check? But they don't run very fast. How fast are armadillos?
I don't know. They run pretty fast.
How fast is an armadillo?
They're not as fast as a rabbit, but I did touch it. Let's put it that way. And then it immediately. No, it didn't roll. It didn't roll. When I grabbed its back, it flipped its tail up and popped me. And so, of course, that's, you know, the reaction. You let go, and then it ran off. I mean, I was just playing, you know, so I didn't really want to kill it.
Okay, I don't know what to do. Show me the road to armadillo. I love it. It's got to be good. So, but if you've got an armadillo, I mean, do they roll into a ball? Are they like hedgehogs? And they
do. If they feel trapped, they'll kind of roll up in a ball.
Well, I reckon if there's a race between a rabbit and an armadillo, I would put my money on the armadillo as long as it rolls up beforehand, and then you kick it, and then it goes all the way down the road. It would overtake the rabbit.
Soccer, or football. Sorry.
Soccer and football.
I'm on English TV. Oh my God.
Oh my goodness, all around the world. Don't kick armadillos. We're not recommending that at all. I love it.
You heard it first from Andrew.
I know. It wasn't my fault. That's how they got the name Show Me the Road to Armadillo. It was you kicking them down the street. I love it. It's really good. But you grew up, so before NASA had arrived, I mean, NASA started building when you were 5,
right.
If I do my maths right. I won't tell people that, but it's around that sort of time. What was the place like beforehand? It was a sleepy little village, as you say, white shells and everything.
Right. Yeah, it was. It was very small. It was one of the first, because it was Quaker, it was one of the first bird sanctuaries in the area. But it was quite lovely, actually. You know, a lot of pastures and huge live oak trees. And literally, we rode horses everywhere. I mean, literally, I remember tying this group of friends of mine and I tied our horses up to the Dairy Queen and went in it. Had our ice cream sandwiches and watching the horses.
I was going to ask you what her name was. What was the name of the Dairy Queen, and did she mind a horse being tied to her? Are in fact a store in America.
Dairy Queen is the old McDonald's. So.
I've been there. I love the Dairy Queen. It's very good.
You get your dilly bars.
It sounds like a social disease. Don't go there. You'll get your dilly bars, especially if you top armadillos. Leave them alone.
Yes, bring your armadillo.
I love it. But you grew up there, which is a wonderful sleepy town, and your father, I believe, was a chemist, and your mother a nurse.
Right.
So you grew up with that wonderful science background and all sorts of things. When did you first hear that NASA were going to start building in your wonderful neck of the woods?
You know, we moved there when I was about 7, and that was actually just after, or just right at the same time. That was in '65, and I think that was really starting to be when they were doing construction there. So it was sort of a part of the landscape to a certain extent. But when we moved there, there was a little over 2,000 people population-wise, and now it's like 20,000 or more. It's just huge. But it was really idyllic in a lot of ways. But of course, there's always something. There's always the blue velvet part of every small town. If you're, I think we had a Superfund site somewhere in the area. Oh well.
But I think that's what happens in little towns. People make their sort of own entertainment, and there's a fantastic community. But tell me about the rest of the community there. Who are the characters you remember?
There was cowboys, and we had a very large, every year, one of the largest, and still to a certain extent do, 4th of July parades. And so everybody would come out, and ride their horses and all that. And there was a little bit of change, as things expanded, that people didn't didn't have as many horses, but there was quite a pretty heavy rural sense of animals and all that sort of thing. And so that kind of atmosphere, and very quiet, and you could pretty much be fairly safe, of course, when you're going about. So
sounds a bit safer than you. There's a wild animal in your house.
Right. Yeah, my 2 companions' dogs are having some sort of discussion. Let's say.
Are they close? Can we see them?
Oh, well, they just ran out now.
You're quite right. They do.
Chasing deer.
Joe. They watched that.
What?
We've heard what he does to armadillos. They're not going to stick around.
We have all sorts of things around here. We have this little doggy door, and it was funny. We live out in the about 15 acres in the western side, in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia.
Right. Oh, fantastic.
And one day the dogs were in here in my office, and the doggy door went clink clink, and I'm going, wait a minute, the dogs are inside. And so they took off, and then I went out, and by the time I got out there, they had treed a bear.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So the bear had been like peeking into the doggy door. Yes.
Wow, but how big is the doggy door then if a bear can get
well,
it?
Thank God it's not, it's maybe this big, but you can have some pretty small bear that come around.
Heavens. But the dog.
That one actually wasn't that small. That one was, I would guess, 300 pounds.
300 pounds, a bargain with the current.
Right. And it was up in the tree. They treated
it. was scared of the dog. So what dogs do you have?
I have different dogs now. If they come back in, I'll pick one up. But
grab one. I'll hold it up. It's like the animal cruelty show. We'll have no.
I only touched the armadillo. Okay.
I know. Yeah. Absolutely. You're tying up horses to the dairy maid, chasing rabbits, terrifying bears. This is a completely different sort of a show. So what are the dogs?
That's what happens in Friendswood. You have nothing to do in a small town, so you're like doing these crazy things.
This is what you do. You make your own fun in Friendswood. It's
right.
What a thrill. The thrill of Friendswood, what a joy. So what are the dogs? You can tell us what the breed is.
I've got a golden doodle and a Bichon Frise. So I have some allergies, so I've got to have a dog that's.
What sort of allergies do you have?
Oh, just dust and I don't know, whatever.
Dust and whatever. You're a doctor, being a scientist. What I love about science is it's so precise, isn't it? So what's a joy? Whenever I talk to the scientist, you go and say, look, what's wrong with me, doctor? Well, it's dust and whatever, really. That's what we have. That's
it covers everything.
Whatever, you're just allergic to it.
I was also taught as a scientist that if you can broaden your range, you got it covered.
Oh no, my background's as a lawyer, so I love the idea.
Yeah.
There saying you're not allowed to do this or whatever, because if you do a bit of whatever, you're in.
And you win.
You can't. You can't fail but win. The power of whatever. I love it. What are you doing now? Whatever you want. It's got to be a thrill. Ah, what a joy! What a joy! Tell me. With the formal education bit that you did, because you went on, so both your parents respected in the community, fantastic, the chemist and the nurse. You decided that a career in science was for you. Talk to me about your education. What happened?
Well, I've always been just super interested in analysis and just discovery, very, very curious. I have a dog here.
Oh, good. Here we go. He's distracted. Right, what have we got here?
Now, do I really want to bring this nasty
Oh, look at that! What's this one called?
This one is Leo. So, and he's just this type A personality.
Oh, he's wonderful. He's very good on camera, Leo. How old's Leo?
Leo's like 11. Come here, Nanny.
He's like, here's another one. So 77 in dog years. And here's another one. What's this one?
This one is Annie. So we try to have a male and a female. So
it looks the same. Looks the same as the other one.
They are. You go to the groomer, they cut them the same. Different colors.
You've only got one dog. Look at it. You put it down.
This one just doesn't show dirt quite as much as the one.
Oh, I see. You sort of polish it off a bit and come in. Lift it up a little bit higher. Let's have a look. There we go. That's fantastic.
Oh.
Oh, and how old's this one?
She's about 8.
8, about 8. Whatever. About 8. I love it. Oh, glorious.
Precisely 8-ish.
Okay, 8-ish is fine. I think in dog years, 8-ish is okay. It works well. And have you always had animals then?
Yeah. I mean, I've always been into horses and dogs, and I had cats, but that's what I really realized I'm allergic to cats. So that's not, so that kind of narrows the whatever into dust and cats.
Oh, yeah, well, dust and cats. And dusty cats are the worst.
Dusty cats. Oh my God.
Texas, it's a bit of a nightmare. So wonderful. So, but you tell us, you were halfway through telling us about your science and your progression through. Yeah.
So when I went to college, and I went to this small regional state school in East Texas, the Great Piney Woods. And I started out in chemistry like my dad, my father, and I really, because we always have these discussions about chemistry and various things. And then when I got to school, they offered a fellowship, money.
You offered money?
To go into physics. And I was like, to declare my major as physics. And I had to have physics anyway. So I was like, okay, I'll take the money. And I just loved it. I mean, it's so, they talk about the sciences, and physics is like the poetry, the literary fiction of science. It really is. And you get all these just crazy, like artistic people that are in physics. And it's really unlike most of the other sciences, because most of the other sciences are applied science, and physics is really the theoretical side of it, where you get into the bones of whatever physical thing is happening, or the chemical, or it's the basis for all science. So I really enjoyed that. So that's why I went into physics.
And it is a joy, as you say, because that whole sort of side where you're looking about the human condition, you're looking about, if you like, the near future and what might happen.
Right.
That sort of narrative, when you can combine both the science and also your creative forces.
Right.
Talk to me about that journey, how you decided not to go directly into the medical side, but more into the writing side.
Well, one thing I always say, and I truly believe this, is that particularly physics, but science in general and art, creativity are really two sides to the same coin. They're really, really similar. And you even, when you think about the people going in, scientists going into a lab, for instance, or an artist going into a studio, you know, it's the same mindset, and you are struggling with a problem, struggling with an issue that you're trying to figure out and you're trying to put together into, you know, either a painting or a sculpture or some type of research that you're trying to figure out what's going on here. So, you know, it's a very similar mindset. Like I said, I mean, it's really fascinating how many scientists are also either creative or appreciate art.
And just that glorious combination. There's a number that you've mentioned in your wonderful other interviews. And I was watching your PBS interview. Where you were very British and very BBC, and there was none of this laughter malarkey. You were sitting there, and what I loved about it, you could tell the PBS people who were brilliant. I love PBS, fantastic. They sat around and talked about a creative meeting. One of the glorious things that they did, they must have went for days and days, probably weeks, and sent to all sorts of research groups to come up with the name of the program. They thought, here we go, what are we going to call it? Because this is PBS, it's all very serious. We're going to get, what do we got? We've got authors, and we're not quite sure who's going to be on the show next, and it might be round the corner. Oh, hang about, maybe there's a pun we could introduce. A pun and all. How would that work? What was the title of that program, Karen?
What? Who named
it? Of that program?
Right. And she always goes, right around the corner.
Right around the corner.
Cute? Somebody came up, I think they, you know, they had a poll or something, and somebody wrote in that name. So
they had a poll on the show as well, all the way from Poland, and they thought, you'll come along, we'll make sure you can work out a good pun when you see it. I love it. We have a channel over here. We have a channel over here called Dave, which shows all sorts of wonderful comedy programs and things like that. And the channel plus one, we always have when that sort of time afterwards when you didn't quite catch it when it came on. The channel plus one is called Dave Vu. You see, like the bit. And that's like your whole channel. So it's worth it just for that one gag. You know? Right around the corner. That was the most fascinating thing. I love it. I mean, great interview, very serious interview, very proper interview. But right around the corner, yeah, that tickled my funny bones, you know? I thought that was wonderful.
Yeah, it was probably one of my more serious.
Oh, you're very serious. My goodness, you were there. You were sitting like a scientist. None of this messing around. No showing your dogs and kicking armadillos down the street. You know?
Well, this dog has been known to start barking. And so it's like, they were asking, well, you know, they said, well, you can bring your dogs up with you. It's like, yeah, you know, maybe not. You know, sometimes the dog's pretty annoying. So
it's not annoying. I mean,
luckily, she's fine. She's fine.
Sitting beautifully. It's that
you got to realize how many cameras and lights and you know the other person, the producer, doing the show, and it's like,
They don't get, and that's what I love about dogs. I was involved. I go down to Cannes every year, and I present and produce all sorts of sessions for them in the industry. And we were showing off in Cannes last year with 8K. 8K is this massive screen with zillions of pixels. So people have seen in 2K and 8K. This is 8K, massive screen. And you could see the great thing about it, when people act, normally you get little bits in the corner. You don't quite get the scenes. And if somebody's eating a meal, they're not really eating, and it doesn't really matter if you're an extra. Every single pixel on the screen you can see. So if a meal's not hot, you see there's not steam coming up and so on and so forth. Programming that works.
The lettuce and the tea.
Oh no, the lettuce on the table. You can tell it's been a bit limp, you know. The armadillos in the corner looking worried. All those sort of things are happening. And it was a great thing. I was there with Ken Watanabe, who was a fantastic Japanese actor, and he was absolutely superb. And it showed his ability as an actor that you could tell every little line on his face was acting in that role. The other thing that worked really, really well was nature, because nature needs no special makeup. It's just there and just does it, and it's real, isn't it?
Right, right.
And that's what I love about it, because when you're looking at these programs, and some of the best programming is all about just being real. And sometimes reality is more bizarre than science fiction.
Sometimes we live in weird times.
Don't we live in weird times? You know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
for you, as a writer, then, how do you, and I know you take your influence from the usual people, C Clarke and all these wonderful people, fantastic, love it. Where do you get your inspiration?
I am in all my writing, I am super into the political and social commentary and impacts, uh, particularly political on individual people, and that's a theme throughout my books. Is this politician decides that they want to take over this or some power play, it actually affects somebody down the road. Now I have this dog. Why don't you move on, dog?
Why don't you move
Little
on?
claws are getting yeah.
It's like, dog.
So within and some people don't get into science fiction. There's kind of these philosophies of science fiction. Some people really don't like political and social commentary in science fiction. I love it. I mean, that's,
I love it. If you have
yeah,
your social commentary, you are a stranger in a strange land.
Exactly.
And if you work on that sort of basis, I think it's glorious.
Right.
The point is this: we live in such extraordinary times already. How on earth are you sort of saying it's fiction? Because it's really fact, isn't it? You can turn around and say, look, about the near future. And people said when the pandemic started, they say, well, hang about, there's a few movies about this, because you look at Inception with Matt Damon and so on and so forth.
Right.
It started, I don't want to ruin the movie for anybody if you haven't seen it, but all of the key elements and all of the key messages were in that 2011 movie, where
Right.
people have done tremendous research in terms of, if this were to happen, what would make it real? And I presume you as a writer are working on the same sort of basis. You want to make your commentary, and as a result, work on that sort of premise. This is Mr. Trump. Yeah, she's on now. But she hasn't mentioned you at all yet. She's talking about torturing armadillos.
We're just almost there.
Armadillos. That's it. Okay, I'll send you love. Yeah, okay. Twice. Okay, thanks a lot. Bye. Bye, Donald. Bye. Okay, no, all good stuff. So he was basically saying, tell us how you do your research in determining the next sort of projects and things like that.
I'm into, and you probably remember this from the PBS interview, but I am into the what if this happened, then where you take your premise of your idea and you put it on an incline and you drop the little pebble and the little pebble goes down, because once you start your premise, and in this series, the Melt trilogy that I finished a couple years ago, it was really, the whole global warming, and that's obviously in the news and what's going to happen with it and all that. What my thought was, what would happen? And I'm not trying to like point fingers at anybody or any of that, because I've always found, so you point a finger at somebody, there's three pointing back at you, because I think it's all of us that are overloading Mother Nature. So, but if you had like a massive global warming, and the way I do this is to create a change in oceanic currents, because that is actually, and this is part of the research item of it, they speculated that if our climate warms X amount, right now, the Gulf Stream goes X direction, and all these other oceanic currents go, and around the continents in certain ways. You could have a sudden shift in these currents that when you have an ocean change, you can really affect a local continental climate. And so that's what I did to alter the Antarctic continental ice. And I moved the Brazilian warm current around Antarctica, and was able to melt the ice cap down there to nothing. And so the entire continent is de-iced. And as far as I know, I have never seen anybody use that as a premise and as a setting, basically, for a story. And so when you do that, and you've raised ocean levels 200 or 300 feet, you lose X amount of land. And of course, all your major port cities are all gone. They're underwater, and so you're moving stuff around, and you're shifting, your food sources and farming and all that. But what you have is you have migration of all these people, so you're going to have political, social turmoil. But the silver lining in my stories is you have an entire continent that's now open, that's never been available before. And so you have people wanting to go down, wanting to homestead. And so my premise of this, this is really starting with the second book. The first book kind of goes into more of a political shenanigans of what happened just prior to this homesteading act. But you have all these people that want to go down and homestead because they're landless. And so the UN develops this sort of a Mad Max type of a Oklahoma style land rush, which gets pretty gnarly. They weren't really planning on people dying, but but then you have, they try to establish this provisional government. Then you have people, which, surprise, surprise, you would have other governments and other people trying to take control of the continent. Because, by golly, here's all this land that's now open that has minerals and all kinds of stuff, raw materials that would be there for the taking. So, I put in this political power plays that are going on in all the books, really, but the two that specifically are in Antarctica are, I'll get my head out, The Sting of the Bee and Listen to the Birds, whereas A Spider Sat Beside Her is more about one of the characters who ultimately carries through the other two books, and her trials and tribulations with this guy who's sort of a Trumpian thing, but he's attorney general with the government in the United States of Amarada, which the America and Canada have now merged because they have less landmass. So anyway, it's all
Amarada, I love that. Armadillos. Show me. See, I knew there's a common thing here. We work on that something. I told you it was inspired from you. You're thinking, you're doing that PBS thing.
It all comes back.
It's there somewhere. The germ of the idea was there when you were kicking the armadillos down the road. So that's what happened. It did, man.
All materials, yeah.
I can see where the germ of the idea is. And as you say, what you're looking at, it's that pebble on the slope.
Right.
Where will it go? And one of the key things that appeals to people about any story is if you as the reader can associate yourself with the protagonist. You have to have elements within there that you say, oh, I can spot that, and yes, I can see that, and you identify with the protagonist. And in your stories, you absolutely nail that, don't you?
I really try to fill out my characters to make them real. And, you know, I work with editors and all this to fine tune all of my characters, because you really have to have, you know, if you go into sort of writing um, type of editing, you know, you want to have these people who have internal and external conflicts. And for example, the man John Barris, who is introduced in the Sting of the Bee, you know, he is wanting to get out of his job. He hates his job. His wife was killed, because there's a lot of violence in Amarada at the time. And so he has, I mean, you have to make people don't leave their homes unless they are forced to. You know, people kind of want to stay where they are for the most part. I mean, you have some adventurous people who would make that type of thing, just like the people who went out west from Europe in the early days of opening of America. But so you want to have all of these elements of a real person, or people won't connect with your characters.
You know, and I think it's that element of keeping things real, and that's why I say it is so important when you're talking about science fiction that fact is stranger than fiction. And the more research that you do, and with your background as a scientist, you're used to that, and you're questioning everything, which is another sort of common thread that we always have on this program. Because we always say, if you get your source of news from one source, you're always going to go on that spiral of the narrative, if you like, because people tend to buy the newspapers that support their own opinion. They tend to watch the channels that support their own views, and so on and so forth. And nowadays, with so much information, we're drowning in a sea of information. You can find information and evidence to support any view.
Yes, yeah.
And so I guess the real way, and this is what I say to our children when growing up, and still say to lots of people, is, look, what you have to do is question everything. Keep an open mind. Get your news from lots of different sources. So we'll watch the BBC. We'll watch PBS with the wonderful titles.
Yeah, we
do the same. CNN,
we watch BBC a lot, the BBC News.
No, yeah. I've seen you impersonating the BBC presenters on PBS. I saw you.
Quite right.
Quite right. Johnny Proper too. Show me the next armadillo. Past. But you're right. You have to do that, because what happens is, otherwise, if you don't question everything, you continue to peddle the same perception.
Yeah, and see, that's no fun anyway. Yeah, you know, I love doing research. Yeah, and you know, I've just finished a new novel, which is commercial literary, more of a literary fiction, and you know, it's just kind of this crazy situation, and it's actually a tragedy, but it's, you know, the one character has an opioid addiction that he developed because some stupid doctor put him on a prescription, you know, and then his wife winds up divorcing him, and they have this 14-year-old child. The woman is black, the guy is white, so we have a mixed race young 14-year-old who is just, doesn't know what to do, because, you know, his whole world has exploded. And so he runs away. He's sent out to a Boy Scout camp to try to help him deal with some of this stuff, and he doesn't relate to, because he's dealing with all this angst and problems, and they're losing their home, and they're having to move, and you know, this is set in 2009 in the middle of the Great Recession in America. So he's in Wyoming at this Boy Scout camp, and he runs away to find this, what he's heard is sort of the shaman in the Arapaho reservation out there. And, you know, but you really try to twist these things and get him, he's just kind of going crazy, and he goes and he runs off to this man who some of the people think is the second coming of Christ. And so, and he finally finds this guy, and all this stuff happens, and I won't go into it all, but it's like you pull stuff out of what's happening in the real world, but you twist it and you make it more interesting. And so, like I said, I can't tell you what all goes on, but that's really the part of the inspiration was the Stranger in a Strange Land.
And Stranger in a Strange Land is a fantastic concept as well. And we're now the big blockbusters now that we're starting to see. We've got the Christopher Nolans of this world. What do you think of those and those sort of concepts?
Which concept?
Christopher Nolan. So at the moment we had Inception years ago, which we've just seen again on the IMAX.
The only I mean, I love science fiction. The only issue I have with some of the science fiction is they've got, because I'm talking about the movies.
Yeah.
The films have to play to an international and a lot of times non-English speaking audience. And I think they've lost some of them. I'm saying they're so visual and guns and destruction and all that. They somewhat lose some of the character development. But I mean, I love science fiction. I think it really as I wrote a article about speculative fiction, which is I believe in the Robert Heinlein definition of speculative fiction, which is near future science fiction, and a lot of times usually has some sort of political commentary with it.
Yeah. Oh no, absolutely. And what he always says when you're talking about definitions, he says near future, whatever. He tends to.
Yeah. I think there's a film of him going, whatever.
I love it. It'd be much easier that way. I think any scientist now, whenever we do the serious bit, we were getting serious then. It was good. That was your PBS moment. I love it. Now they'll highlight this, little edited bits. We can do we did this and this. But you're right. It is those near future moments where you can relate, and it does sometimes through humor and through writing and using the imagination. It's a wake-up call, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, because what you can do with that is it basically becomes a magnifying glass, and you magnify issues within society. And Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale is a perfect case for that, where she magnifies those elements, within that story to show sort of an extreme, so you can really see it. And of course, George Orwell's 1984 does the same type of thing. So it's a similar genre of that. So that's really what I'm drawn to, because I so believe that the problem in politics is the power play, and the oligarchies that are formed when you have too much money that's supporting these politicians. You basically have, and this is a theme throughout my work, is you have these puppet masters, and they're basically running the government. And again, it's the smallest people in the society that really get hurt, and people don't think about it. They think, oh well, it's all happening in Washington D.C. There's all these battles and everything, but it does trickle down to the people. And one of the things I was really interested in is the whole opioid addiction issue. And one of the things I wanted to put it in this book is that the FDA and all the power players in the drug industry made it possible. I mean, it looks like you've got to be kidding me. How can you have allowed these doctors to prescribe this crap and basically become drug pushers? And they've killed hundreds of thousands of people because of it, and it's because of corruption. And that's a reoccurring theme in my books.
And you know, I mean, the money being spouted around, and we talk about, and this is where a lot of these conspiracy theories come up as well, is because there is so much money and there's an incentive for people to do things. And lots of people come out with all sorts of theories, and we have it with the current pandemic. I won't repeat them here, but the obvious ones, there's lots in the media and saying this is what happened. Trying to drill down into that without sort of panicking the people and say, look, you should question everything, question the motive, question why things might be happening, because that's
Right.
going to put us in a better place. So in terms of your own book and your motivation, is that part of the motivation then to say, look, let people stop and think, see what happens when that pebble is on that slope, think about the consequences, because it might have an impact. Are you hoping to change the world?
I'm hoping it will make people think. There is that. You know, the Melt trilogy, part of that is, it's part of it is the political thing, but a part of it is just our human relationship with the earth. And we need to think of the earth as a constituent in our society. You know, they're a part of it, and if we don't take care of that, I mean, you know, Mother Earth will react to what we do, maybe not in a great way. You know, if we push something, you know, she will react to that. So we have to understand that we're a part of the earth, and act accordingly, and be respectful. And I think that's part of, you know, if someone takes that away, then wonderful. I mean, you have to be very careful, tread very lightly of pushing any kind of agenda down somebody's throat. You know, that doesn't work.
Yeah, you absolutely, and I think it's the art of the sell, if you like. I think what's so important, and politicians
Right.
mainly are in the business of getting re-elected, because it tends to be short term. You have 4 years and then maybe another four, whatever, see what happens. But the basic sort of principle is exactly that: is you are on that perpetual cycle where you have to manipulate the media, because that's your powerful tool, isn't it? If you can get the hearts and minds of the general public, the voters, that's the way to persuade people.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of in the book I just finished, where the sky meets the earth. It's There's a character at the end of the book that really kind of ties it all together, and the problem really is how to do campaign finance reform. You know, is it even possible? Because no one has the incentive that's in politics to do the campaign reform. So, I mean, that's really, if you can somehow at least mitigate the amount of influence that money has, then it would at least try to make it more reasonable. I mean, it's not government for the people. You know, it's government for the, you know, the basically the lobbyists who are working for the companies, and, you know, and the politicians. It's like this little nest of, you know, around the federal government, that are controlling stuff, and, you know, writing checks and all this, for their campaigns, and then they put a bill forward that helps X, Y, or Z, or takes X, Y, or Z regulations out. And, you know, I'm an independent. I, you know, don't belong to any political party. And you have to have some regulations, but you have to have reasonable regulations, because you don't want to stop business or stop progress. You want to have it go forward in a rational way. But, you know, it's just, you get all these politicians, and the government winds up getting jacked around, and for no good reason, and it certainly isn't for the people.
Well, and the difficulty is, Karen, that everything then boils down to a soundbite, doesn't it? And I think, and people don't have a real chance to look at the real issues and real lies.
Right.
You yourself, have you been tempted by politics? You say you're an independent. Would you go in there?
No, I'm too honest. I
Too
think.
honest. Excellent, right? I'm too honest to be a politician. There's your T-shirt. You could do it. People
Uh,
might like a bit of honesty.
I'm also probably tend to be a little bit of the lone wolf. So it's like, you know, I've done stuff in my life. You know, I had a art gallery for a while.
I
And
know you did. And what I loved about your art gallery, and this is great, you didn't just do the established artists, but you also helped the up-and-coming ones, didn't you?
right. I actually really enjoyed that part because you would go search out.
See, you've got my research. You said research these things. So
Right.
it's
Well,
no
and that's
email.
yeah, and that's you know, it's fun to go find people because it's all about ideas.
Yeah.
You know, good art is about ideas, and so as a scientist or an artist or an author, you know, you constantly are looking, you know, because you're curious.
Right.
So I really enjoyed that, and it. But the other thing is, I had it for about 5 years in Houston, but I found that I just wasn't a good enough schmoozer, you know, to I
reckon you're
can't,
a brilliant schmoozer.
huh?
I reckon if you got a few people armadillo tossing, you would have cracked the art world, you know? They would have loved it. It would have been, you know, art and whatever, you know, we can do it.
That was the name of the gallery. How'd you know?
I get it. I get it. It's fantastic. It's wonderful. The lovely art gallery. And that's what I love about it as well. So, I mean, looking back, one of the things we've done on the show as well, we often get very successful people, such as yourself, and we get them to look back on their career, stretching X number of years, half a century or whatever. And you turn around and say, okay, what are the lessons that you have learned over that career? Because people learn from people. If you want to be successful, look at what successful people do. And so a lot of times when I get tremendously successful and brilliant and gloriously creative people such as yourself on the show, whatever, you turn around and you say to them, what have you learned over your career? What are those lessons?
Yeah, I would say one of the, especially for young people coming up, you know, I always did my job. You know, I always, I mean, I was paid for X, Y, and Z. I do X, Y, and Z for them, but I never kowtowed. You know, I never kissed up. I just was not interested in that. And I think you really, if you want to have respect for yourself, you know, you just have to not sort of bend to that tendency, because it's easy, I suppose, to do that. But, you know, I was never interested in that. And, you know, I would, I'm not trying to brag or anything, but I just sort of was more the lion than the lamb, I suppose, and not in a too annoying way. But, you know, and you want to have fun, but you just want to be yourself. You know, don't be afraid. You know, if you go through life in fear, um, you know, you're just not going to be happy. You know, I remember doing stuff. I purchased a building one time, and I thought, okay, you know, if I lose my job and, you know, lose this building and all, you know, I could actually have a kind of a nice cardboard box under the freeway somewhere, you know. Is it really that bad? You know, that's like the end member. And if you can deal with that, you know, it's but, you know, be bold, you know, really, I think be bold and enjoy what you're doing, and just grasp life. And then that's really, that will take you far.
And I think you're right. I mean, we always say be yourself because everybody else is taken. And I think that's
Yeah.
where you are bold, and we look at that. And if you look back then and see the 7-year-old Karen sitting outside NASA and wondering what's going on, what advice would you give to yourself?
Move out of Texas earlier. I mean, I love Texas, but the heat just is, the climate was not good for me. I mean, it's a very interesting area, and I like the culture. Uh, but I probably would have maybe would have liked to have traveled. I traveled, but I would have liked to travel more. Yeah, I think really, you know, I pretty much did follow my path to a certain extent. You know, I'm kind of a believer in fate, at least to a certain extent. I mean, I think you're pushed directions, whether you want to be or not. Um, you know, I don't know where that comes from, but I think there's a certain amount of that. And I also believe in karma. Um, and you talk about being 7 years old. One of the things that I did and really enjoyed about growing up in Friendswood is I would go outside and just sit. And I would sit until, and you know, the birds would be quiet. And you know, when you're moving, when a human is moving around in the woods, you know, everything is kind of quiet. But if you sit and just listen, and all the birds come back and all the, you know, animals start moving around, even the armadillos. And then you go catch them. No, but it's really, it's, I think being with nature, respecting nature, and is really important to kind of get out of yourself and focusing on external things. I think is really important.
And I think you're right, is that sometimes it is those moments of stillness that people really miss. People want
Yeah.
to, and one of the great things to come out, if you like, and there have been positive things that come out as well as all the terrible things out of lockdown and the pandemic and so on and so forth. It's made people reevaluate sometimes the things they've taken for granted, whether it's relationships, whether it's teachers and being able to go to a school and children getting the benefit of being taught by somebody within a school classroom. You get the everyday hero. So we had Banksy, for example, the artist Banksy, and he had this wonderful picture, which I think depicted it really well, where they had a child playing, and they had, in a little box, they had all the usual superheroes. There was Batman and Spider-Man and Robin and Wonder Woman. But the child was playing with an NHS nurse, National Health Service nurse, because they recognize that they are the new superheroes.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that has been that shift, hasn't it? Where we've got that realization that actually being still occasionally is really powerful. What are the lessons that you've learned during lockdown?
Well, since you know I'm a writer and you know I kind of have my own office, it hasn't been that much different for me. And thank God our daughter graduated from college and got a job last year before all this came about. But I do think that um, being quiet is super important. I remember our daughter was here with a friend one time and they'd been watching TV and it was a beautiful day. And so I went in there and I just turned the TV off. And, you know, the other, and my daughter didn't say anything, but this other girl said, "We were watching that." And I'm like, "Not anymore." Go outside and play. So, I mean, I think you have to be disciplined about, you know, what all you're going to do, even for yourself, you know, and give yourself time. I mean, there's times that, you know, I'm working out or doing something and I just turn the TV off, you know, and just have quiet, because that's where you really start thinking and especially as an author, you want to try to start imagining things and scenes and what could happen. So it's important for your own development.
Yeah, and as an author, I mean, a lot of people, we have lots of creative people come on the show. And I'm always fascinated. And there's always a different answer, various answers, about the creative process. I mean, obviously, you do a lot of research when you're starting a book. Talk to me about other particular times you like writing in the morning. Do you do lots of thinking first before putting pen to paper or tapping away? Talk to me about that process.
Yeah, I mean, I usually like to write in the morning.
What I also love is that your computer is so beautifully timed to the music.
Sorry.
No, it's good. Because it's like, well, it's like that Winnie the Pooh book. It is. I used to have a Winnie the Pooh book when I was 6, and A.A. Milne, when you had to turn the page, it used to go bling, and you have to do the turn of the page.
Like
So whenever you say certain words, your computer makes a noise. It's like,
no, it's
the
my
best sound
emails
I've ever.
coming in. Oh, I should have
You
dropped
shouldn't.
that.
No, I love it. It's real. This is it. It means it's in the moment. It's going to be good. So I love. It's going to be well worthwhile. But talk to me then about that creative process. I mean, how do you do it?
Well, it's a combination. When I'm thinking about a new novel, I kind of get this seed going. And again, if you don't have quiet time, you will never, or at least in my opinion, you will never sort of have that creative pop of, this. I don't know. I think a lot. I mean, I'm always constantly debating things in my head. And so when I come up with a concept, I tend to, some people call it whiteboarding, but I don't have a whiteboard. So I have these big white pages. And so I will sketch out sort of chapters to a certain extent with just, notations of a chapter, as I go along. And you have to come up with a beginning, a middle, and an end, have an arc and all this stuff. And then, but you want it to be, even if you have some sort of political, social message, like I said, you have to really step lightly on that, I think, because it gets pedantic and just annoying. Because you really want to show a story, for one thing. The thing about writing a novel is it's all about show and not tell. You don't want to be in somebody's face. So you show a scene and you show what's happening so that your audience comes with you. And this is the other thing that's super important about having characters, protagonists that people care about, because then they come along and it's the characters that actually bring the plot together and bring it along. But you do have to have, I always want to have action. I want to have stuff going on, because the other part is I believe that we show character by our actions. And so if you create, a plot where stuff is going on, then you also can show how a character is developing, and show different sides of them, how they react within the scene. And then I also go through, once I do kind of a draft, then I have a developmental editor that bops back and forth with me, and he or she tells me, you need to bolster up this area, or show more here, or whatever, and usually I send, like this latest one that I sent this editor, I sent it at a stage where I would call it, a draft. It was 65,000 words draft, and I wanted to expand it to 90. So one of my asks to her is, okay, where do you see holes that I need to fill and stuff like that. But the editorial process is huge in the creative process. I mean, to bounce off people, and then the copy editing at the end to get typos and stuff like that, and grammar and all. So, but it's quite a process. I mean, it usually, I wrote this last book in a year to a year and a half, something like that. So
it takes a long time. And I'm always interested in that sort of collaboration and how people work together. Tell me about when you fall out with people. How do you resolve that?
Fallout.
Yeah, if you have an artistic dispute, or on that sort of basis, how's that normally resolved?
You mean with like an editor?
Yeah,
Or
anybody. If you've got a team of people.
Well, since I love a discussion, I love arguing, to a certain extent, as long as both people are respectful. I did an article recently. I wrote an article and published it on futurism, on George Orwell's Animal Farm. It's the 75th anniversary. Was on August 17th, and so I wrote this thing out, and I was, on Facebook, pushed it out, and man, I got some great comments, back and forth about the premise of Animal Farm. So to me, I love getting that feedback and that discussion back and forth. It has to be respectful. So in a creative sense, I really listen to people, because that's in a artistic.
What was that?
I throw the armadillo at him. Oh, that's what I said. But I really, I'm interested in what people have to say, as long as it's like I said, respectful and all that, because the people who you're talking to, those are your readers, and so you want to hear what they have to say. Now, some you always get weird reviews on stuff sometimes, and it's like, what? So some people.
What was the debate? You say that the discussion about Animal Farm started this massive debate about the premise. What was the debate about? What triggered? What excited you?
Yeah, some people talk about where his influences were.
What were they? What were your views on that?
Well, the article, I wrote, because I'm really interested in, and it's the research thing about how people think. And one of the things that I learned about George Orwell is that he was basically a journalist who went into Spain during the Spanish Civil War, and that was like the major influence on the rest of his writing for the rest of his life. Because he realized that there was some bad shit going on. Sorry, I don't know if I can say that, but it's and that his purpose became trying to show people that this politics and power is very dangerous. And then people, as far as this discussion back and forth, there was people that were wondering, well, can it really, because you always have dominance and hierarchy within, human civilization, can you really change that? And then there's some truth to that. That's instinctual that we do that. But my response back is that, one, you really have to treat people with compassion. And it's really goes back to both Christianity and Buddhism, where compassion is to your fellow human being is paramount. And the other thing is, you have to have laws, fair laws, that are applied equally across your citizenry. And that's really kind of the bounds that you've got to deal with. But if you have people who are power hungry and somehow flagrantly disregard these laws, we're supposed to be a country of laws, and but if you don't follow them, then it's a problem. And if you're in power and you're flaunting these laws, then you can get away with it as long as people let you get away with it.
It's always, I say, and it's one of those timeless novels, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And that's really why I thought it was important to highlight it, because it's as true today as it was when he wrote it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always say, people always say history repeats itself, and yet we never learn the lessons of history. And looking at that, what would you say over your fantastic career and varied career? What have been your regrets?
Oh, probably not my inability to be able to start writing earlier in my life. I would have liked to have. It was a process. What's strange about it is, I always loved reading, and I read voraciously and good literature as a kid. And what was funny is that I really started my writing career because of the art gallery. Because I just, I love the visual, and I'm very visual in my writing. I love the visual, but you also had to write sort of descriptions of the artwork and where the artist was coming from and all these various things. And I realized I kind of have a talent for this and I enjoy it. And so, I started, in fact, that was when I started writing my first novel, was during that time frame. And I also, during those 5 years I had the art gallery, I used literature as a premise for these group shows that I did. I usually did one a year. And I did one, Brave New World, on civil disobedience, just various things as a trigger for these artists to either have a new piece that they developed for the show or something that they, had, because I would pick artists who, dovetailed in with the premise I was pushing out there. So, we had artists, Derek Bossier, who was an English artist. He did a piece for one of the shows on Rodney King, the Rodney King beatings. And we had Mel Chin, who's a famous international artist, come in and do something on one of the Gulf Wars that we had. And so it was really fascinating, and I loved really talking with artists and sort of where they were. And again, it's sprang off me into my writing, because I did photography and stuff like that, but I really found my creative outlet through that art gallery.
I mean, you mentioned books when you were growing up. What books do you remember in particular?
I read a lot of the Robert Heinlein books. I'm trying to think what else that I read. John Steinbeck.
But that's more animal torture for you, isn't it? Mice and men crushing things. There we go. I told you, show me a person to the age of 7, I'll crush a few mice. This is like the psychiatrist's couch, isn't it? Animal Farm, bit of Steinbeck, a bit of the mice, armadillos down the road. Is there any wonder?
Armadillo on a stick.
Oh, we love it. We love it. It's got to be good. I tell you what, whatever. This is how we can have it. It's got to be good. It's an absolute thrill. So, yes, all those glorious, glorious books. Well, listen, I ask all my guests at the very end, but I know I'm going to get you back because there's so much to talk about. And you do your blogs and you do your writing and you've got all these wonderful things. And you spark animal activists around the world. Are all going to be tuning in now with another thrilling episode of Attack the Armadillo. We'll do that.
Well, thank God we mainly on a British show, because they will at least know it's all tongue in cheek.
Oh, you'll be amazed. No, armadillo lovers are part of my core audience. Every week because I do it alphabetically when I get the letters. Armadillo lovers, just after I've done the aardvarks. And then I work my way.
Never touched an aardvark.
I've never touched the aardvarks. People are relieved. You wait till you get to the zebras. We love it. It's going to be an absolute thrill. But I always ask each of my guests, just to finish on this bit, and you will come back and join us and come and play again, won't you?
Sure. It's fun.
Fantastic. I love it. But before you go, how would you like to be remembered?
Oh, goodness. Let's see. Will I be remembered is another question. You know, I think that, again, back to that sort of the old Frank Sinatra, you know, that I did it my way. I mean, I really enjoyed my life and kind of put myself out there. And that's about all you can do, is just kind of keep pushing forward, and being tenacious is bold and tenacious.
Bold and tenacious.
That's it.
Bold and tenacious and patient.
Whatever.
Yeah, whatever. You can have your bit of silence. Bold and tenacious. I love it. Bat. That's where it all started. That's where the current pandemic started, with bold and tenacious. That's what it really meant. It was all down.
Pangolin, that's kind of like an
you see? This is science fiction. This is going to be our next. We'd write it together. I love it. We'd
be laughing too hard. We'd never write.
Oh, you're probably right. You're probably right. It has been a joy. Thank you so much for being my guest today.
Well, thank you for inviting me too.
It's a real thrill, and I look forward to having you back.
Yeah, it'd be great.
Thanks a lot. Karen Lanning, thank you very much for joining me. Take care.
Hey, I'll have an armadillo next time.
It might be stuffed, I know. It's coming. Be good. Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
So thank you indeed to my wonderful guest, Karen Lanning. And no animals or armadillos were hurt in the filming of this particular program, I should say. It was, however, a joy, an absolute joy. I love working with creative people. I love finding out about the creative process and what she's learned over her rich career as a scientist and a science fiction writer. And so often, science fiction is stranger, if you like, than science fact is in fact stranger than science fiction. If you want to be a guest on the show, write to me at guests@octopustv.com. That's guests@octopustv.com. If you have any comments about armadillos or whatever, do write. It's always great to be in touch. Don't forget to subscribe, follow, stalk, and share. It's been an absolute joy. Thank you so much for joining me. Until next time, I've been Andrew Eborn. It's been an absolute pleasure. See you then. Bye-bye.